I go birding, I guess, for numerous reasons. I love to get out into nature, first of all. So even if it is a day where I really don't see a lot of birds, if it's a nice enough day outside, any day spent in nature is a good day. I also go because it is a bit of an escape from daily stresses. For me, it's the perfect unwind. I can go out there and anything that I've been thinking about or been planning for or a deadline or something, it just disappears while you're out there in nature looking for birds. I was about 10 years old when I first started getting an interest in birds. And I think the thing that really triggered my interest was my parents had a bird feeder just outside our kitchen window. And day to day, I would see all the different birds out there feeding, and then through the seasons, they'd come and go. And it really intrigued me. And I wanted to know more about where did these birds go? They're here for a month or two, where they fly in for a day, and then they disappear, and there's all these different kinds of birds coming. And then something just kind of got triggered in my interest there. So I started to look into it a bit and got a field guide. And then once I had the field guide, I could identify the birds. And I just wanted to know more and more. A lot of birders talk about a spark bird, which is a bird or sort of an incident that happens that sparks their interest in the birds. But for me, I think it was just generally my parents getting that feeder and me seeing the wild birds. And then eventually I built a nest box, and we had a couple of house sparrows nesting outside the window right beside the feeder, which isn't really ideal, but I didn't know that at the time, right? And yeah, then from there it was like I need to go out. I need to go find birds and look other places, right? If I know I'm going birding, I kind of do a little bit of prep. I sort of think, okay, where am I going to be going in the environment or the habitat that I'm going? And am I going to really need to be listening, or am I going to really need to be looking? Is there anything extraordinary that might show up depending on the season? You're using your ears and you're using your eyes all the time, and you have to be kind of hypersensitive to sounds and so on too. Otherwise, you're going to miss hearing some things, right? And quite often, birds are identified only by sound. I'll have times when I go out into the forest and I'll hear 18 species and maybe see 6 or 7. But you start to learn the bird calls and you start to understand the songs and the differences in the way the birds sound. So yeah, tuning in with your ears makes a big difference in being able to find and identify birds. As a hobby, it can be very inclusive because you can do it from just about anywhere. I could be in this house today and at my window observing birds outside. I can get in the car or take a bus down to a park and go birding there, but I don't have to necessarily go venture into far afield places. And just about anyone can do it. There's birds everywhere. If you have the ability to get outdoors, and if you can get yourself a pair of binoculars, even if you have to borrow them to see if it's something that you're really into, anyone can become a birder.
Closer to summer, especially when it gets hot in the day, you want to be out early, really early, so that you can beat the heat of the day. And a lot of birds start singing just at the break of dawn. So you'll get the most activity and the most song right close to dawn.
A lot of birders, especially when you've been birding a while, we get to see a lot of birds a lot of the time, and it's very easy to overlook or just say, oh, there's a robin, there's a Steller's jay, there's birds that are relatively common to us. But quite often those are some of the more interesting birds, and they're quite often found everywhere, like in the habitats that we're looking. And they can be very beautiful as well.
The male and the female ducks, often the male is much more colorful and the female is much more drab, and there's a reason for that. The female has to incubate the eggs, so it needs to be well hidden, so it can't be very colorful. Male ducks can be as colorful as they need to be. The males don't typically take part in raising the young in waterfowl. Each species builds a very distinctive nest, so the nests can appear different in shape, size, and the materials used inside the nest. For instance, like bush tit, it has a nest that looks like a sock hanging from the tree, a green sock. It's made largely of it's all natural fibers and moss. And then a cup or mud nest that's in a tree, that's going to be something like a vireo or a thrush, right? Hummingbirds will use spider webs to help with the integrity of their nest. They build an extraordinarily tiny nest. A lot of them are about the size of a loony or toonie. And with natural materials, but spider webs they'll actually use to toughen the nest.
One of the things that a lot of birders like to do is to see as many birds as they can in a given time frame. Everybody has a life list, so that life list is all the birds you've ever seen in your entire life. And that life list can be for your backyard. The life list can be for your, county or city, province, country, or the entire planet, right? So everyone knows their life list. I think mine is at 435 or something now.
It's good to share places that have wildlife and that have birds, but there's always this fear that if you overshare and it becomes too popular, it'll degrade the habitat or it'll scare the birds or the animals away, right? So it's always kind of a fine line between sharing and oversharing, I guess.
If you are a birder or photographer, I think one thing that we should keep in mind is you always want to put your subject first, right? We're there to watch the birds, observe the birds, record the birds, and photograph the birds. But if you're not putting your subject ahead of yourself, and for instance, if you're a photographer and you just want to get the ultimate photograph, but that puts the bird at risk, then that's not good, right? You got to think of your subject first, right? So always put your birds before your photos. Sadly, the numbers of birds in general in North America have decreased significantly in the last 30, 40 years. I've seen some estimates of, in some species, of up to 80-90% decline. And for younger birders and people now, when they go out and see certain species or certain amounts of species, they're in awe. But realistically, if you were to go back 40 years, a lot of those birds in the same habitat would have been in much larger numbers. We also lose migratory species more easily to things like tall glass skyscrapers. There's a lot of collisions with skyscrapers nowadays. Window collision is primarily medium to small size birds and migratory songbirds. And a lot of the problem is lights left on in tall buildings. They get attracted to them during migration for some reason. They hit the glass and typically perish. And habitat shrinkage is a big problem. A lot of habitat destruction in the bird world. Marshes, woodlands, farms, these kind of things where birds tend to be most common, that has shrunk. There is some positive news. Some in conservation, some birds have actually been recovering or increasing. But the pressures put on by development and whatnot is definitely tough to see over the decades, yeah. There's quite a few less birds than there used to be. That's one thing birding does, is that it does give you a much greater, or at least in my case, it gave me a greater appreciation for nature. And that we are not the only ones on this planet, and we're here with many other species sharing this planet. And the beauty of birds is just something I can really appreciate, and it relaxes me, and it helps me kind of get out of my head, I guess you could say, and just into a better space sometimes